A black Marine sniper stood in handcuffs, accused of a crime he didn't commit. The officers had no idea who they were dealing with, until a four-star general walked into the courtroom. What happened next would expose a system rigged against him from the start. This isn't just another arrest story. It's a revelation of how racial bias operates in plain sight, even against those who've served their country. The general's apology wasn't just words, it was a seismic shift. The flashing lights appeared in his rear view as he drove home from night training. The Marine sniper had followed every traffic law, hands at 10 and 2, speed exactly at the limit. The officer approached with a flashlight beam cutting through the driver's side window. "Your taillight's out," he stated flatly. But the body cam footage later told a different story. The light was working perfectly. The officer's posture stiffened when the driver handed over his military ID instead of his license. Civilian records show black drivers are 20% more likely to be pulled over for equipment violations than white drivers. The sniper remained still, speaking only when asked. He cited his service record, his training, his rank. Then came the shift. "I smell marijuana," one officer announced. It's a phrase documented in hundreds of disputed stops nationwide. They ordered him out of the vehicle. The pat-down found nothing. The 20-minute search of his trunk and seats turned up no contraband, not a single leaf. By the time they cuffed him, the report's narrative had already hardened. Prosecutors would later note discrepancies between the written account and the body cam footage. Missing details, shifting justifications. This wasn't an oversight. It was the first crack in a system designed to ignore context. The arrest report listed him as unemployed, not as an active duty Marine, not as a decorated expert marksman. Just another black man in handcuffs. Meanwhile, military records in a separate database told the true story. No disciplinary actions, no substance abuse flags, 2 combat deployments with commendations. None of this made it into the charging documents. The officers filed the paperwork without checking public military registries, without verifying his alibi from base logs. They classified him as they saw him, not as he was. The rifle he'd qualified with that afternoon still sat in its case in the trunk. The same hands they cuffed had been praised that morning for surgical precision. None of it mattered once the system clicked into motion. By the time they booked him, the charges had already taken on their own momentum. The prosecutor would later admit they hadn't requested body cam footage initially. Why would they? The report seemed clear enough. What they didn't know, what nobody had bothered to check, was that this arrest had just tripped a silent alarm in a military legal office 90 miles away. The sniper spent the night in a cell. The system had done this before. It knew how to keep moving, but this time gears were turning elsewhere. At 0500, as they processed his release, a JAG officer at Quantico was already pulling his service record. By sunrise, the file landed on a desk at the Pentagon, and by noon, a 4-star general would be briefed on something that rarely reached his level, a routine traffic stop gone wrong. The discrepancy between the civilian paperwork and military records was too stark to ignore. The date of the arrest? He'd been on base qualifying with live rounds. The time of the alleged violation? His commander had signed him out 30 minutes prior. None of this appeared in the police report. Nobody had asked. So the general made a decision, not through official channels, not through lawyers. He walked into his closet and reached for his dress uniform. 200 miles away, the sniper sat in another fluorescent-lit room, this time a courthouse. He didn't know it yet, but the system was about to meet a force even more relentless than its own inertia. The officers who'd arrested him had assumed their report was the final word. They were wrong. The courthouse doors were about to swing, open, and standing in them, metals catching the light, was a man who'd spent his life studying how to dismantle flawed systems with precision. It started with a taillight that wasn't broken. It ended with an apology nobody saw coming. But first, the system would have to confront its own reflection. The arrest report contained a critical void where his identity should have been. Standard procedure dictates listing military affiliation for veterans and active duty personnel, a fact any officer with basic training would know. Yet the paperwork described him simply as unemployed, erasing not just his service but his entire professional existence. This wasn't an oversight. It followed a documented pattern. Studies of arrest reports show black defendants' positive attributes, employment, education, community ties, are disproportionately omitted compared to white defendants facing similar charges. The sniper's marksmanship qualifications, which civilian courts routinely consider in character assessments, never made it into the record. Neither did his clean disciplinary history. The prosecution initially refused discovery requests for the body cam footage, claiming officer safety concerns. When the judge finally ordered its release, the video showed 3 discrepancies within the first 90 seconds. The officer's sworn statement claimed the sniper had furtive movements before exiting the vehicle. The footage showed his hands, visible on the steering wheel at all times. The report described resistance during pat-down. The video captured him standing motionless, arms spread, following every instruction. Most glaring was the timeline. Officers testified they smelled marijuana immediately upon approaching the vehicle. The body cam's timestamp proved they'd been at the window for 47 seconds before either officer mentioned it. That critical gap, more than enough time to assess the driver's race, never appeared in any written report. The judge later noted these inconsistencies in the formal record, though by then the damage was done. The arrest had already triggered automatic flags in multiple databases. His name now appeared in firearms registries under a holding status, jeopardizing his weapons qualifications. The Marine Corps requires immediate reporting of any legal proceedings, meaning his command received notification of charges before they'd even seen the evidence. Military defense attorneys would later find something peculiar in the civilian court filings. The standard military status verification form, a routine checkbox in most jurisdictions, had been left entirely blank. Not marked unknown, not filed incorrectly, simply missing, as if someone had removed it from the packet before submission. This paper trail of omissions created a distorted echo of the man. The civilian court system saw an unemployed suspect with alleged drug ties. The military database reflected a decorated expert marksman with top-secret clearance. 2 parallel realities, separated only by what someone chose to include or exclude on a form. Meanwhile, base commanders received automated alerts about his arrest, but no context about the contradictory evidence. Standard protocol requires civilian authorities to verify military status before processing, but that step never happened. By the time his JAG representative requested the arrest footage, the prosecution had already scheduled the first plea hearing. The sniper's civilian attorney made 12 separate requests for complete arrest records. Each time, clerks provided partial files, missing pages, incomplete narratives, redacted witness statements. Only when the military lawyer filed a motion under the Service Members Civil Relief Act did the full documentation surface. That's when they found the most telling omission. Nowhere in the original arrest report did officers note the Marine insignia on his vehicle, his military ID, or his repeated verbal declarations of active duty status. These weren't minor clerical errors. They formed a specific pattern, one that erased any mitigating context about who they were detaining. Research on arrest documentation shows such selective reporting directly impacts bond amounts, charging decisions, and eventual sentencing. The more incomplete the picture, the harsher the outcome tends to be. The judge's eventual acknowledgement of troubling inconsistencies came too late to prevent the cascade. By then, the arrest had already triggered automatic suspensions in the sniper's security clearances. His name populated law enforcement databases under narcotics flags. The damage to his reputation and career prospects extended far beyond the courtroom. What made this case different wasn't the factual discrepancies. Those occur regularly. It was that someone with authority finally tracked the omissions back to their source. 3 days after the arrest, a junior JAG officer running routine scans of civilian court dockets spotted the anomaly. An active duty service member listed as unemployed. She flagged it. Her supervisor escalated. By the time the general received the briefing, investigators had already reconstructed the truth from timestamps and training logs. The sniper couldn't possibly have been where officers claimed. Base security showed him scanning out 30 minutes after their alleged stop time. The general's staff mapped the supposed arrest location against his verified route home. The math didn't add up. None of these facts had surfaced in the original prosecution file. They existed in parallel systems, military databases, gate logs, range schedules, that civilian authorities either didn't check or chose to ignore. The arrest report's omissions weren't accidental gaps. They were structural. Each missing detail made the sniper seem more suspicious, less credible, less human. By the time he stood before the judge for arraignment, the system had already painted its portrait based on selective facts. Only one person in that courtroom knew the full picture wasn't just incomplete, it was inverted. And he was about to walk through the doors wearing 4 stars. The military personnel file told a different story from the civilian arrest report. 2 combat deployments stood listed under his service record, both with valor citations for actions under fire. His unit had submitted paperwork for a Bronze Star 6 months prior to the traffic stop, recognizing his controlled response during an ambush that saved 9 Marines. Commanding officers' evaluations used phrases like flawless discipline and unshakable composure. These weren't empty compliments. They reflected concrete incidents, like the time he waited 14 motionless hours in a sniper hide without breaking cover, even after an anti-personnel mine detonated 30 yards from his position. Military psychologists had cleared him for elite duty after extensive screenings. Their files showed no history of substance abuse, no disciplinary actions, not even a single counseling session for emotional control issues. The Marine Corps' stringent anti-drug policies meant he underwent urinalysis testing every 60 days, without fail. Every result came back clean. His security clearance required background investigations that scrutinized every aspect of his personal life. Not a single red flag had ever appeared. The narcotics allegations in the civilian arrest report weren't just improbable. They contradicted years of documented behavior. Marines in his specialty face random drug tests at any moment. A positive result means automatic discharge. He'd passed 17 consecutive screenings in the 3 years before his arrest. His last test had occurred 11 days prior to the traffic stop. The military's records showed a stark contradiction to the civilian accusations. His training logs revealed even more about his character. Qualification scores placed him in the top 2% of all Marine marksmen. That required not just physical skill, but extreme mental discipline. The rifle range doesn't tolerate tremors or impaired judgment. His consistent, perfect scores under live-fire conditions demonstrated a level of control that made the officer's claims physiologically implausible. Marines who handle $15,000 precision weapons don't risk their careers or their teammates' lives with substance abuse. Base access logs showed another inconsistency. The arrest supposedly occurred at 22:45 hours. Security records proved he'd scanned out of the training facility at 23:17 that night, 32 minutes after police claimed to have him in custody. The math didn't add up. His route home passed through 3 more checkpoints, all time-stamped. Each one placed him miles away from the alleged stop location at the reported time. His commanding officer later testified that the sniper had arrived for morning formation exactly on time the next day, showing no signs of distress or fatigue. This wasn't unusual behavior. His personnel file contained 18 separate commendations for reliability under extreme conditions. The same man civilian authorities portrayed as a suspicious character with possible drug ties was, by military standards, a model service member. Why didn't these facts surface during the arrest? Because nobody checked. Standard interagency agreements allow law enforcement to verify military status through Defense Department databases. The arresting officers never initiated that request. Had they done so, they would have received immediate notification of his security clearance level, active duty status, and clean record. Instead, they processed him like any other civilian suspect. The military justice system operates differently from its civilian counterpart. Where civilian courts often accept police reports at face value. JAG attorneys cross-reference every claim against service records. When the sniper's attorney requested his military file be entered into evidence, prosecutors initially objected, calling it irrelevant. The judge overruled them. That decision changed everything. Suddenly, the court had parallel documentation for the same individual, one portraying a potentially dangerous suspect, the other proving a decorated warfighter with impeccable credentials. The defense didn't need to argue about credibility. The service record spoke for itself. Medical records provided further evidence. Military physicians had examined him 3 days before the arrest for a routine physical. Their notes described optimal physical and mental condition, with no signs of substance use or withdrawal. Baseline blood work showed toxin levels consistent with a clean test. These weren't subjective opinions but quantifiable data points. The contrast between systems became undeniable. Where civilian authorities saw suspicion, the military saw reliability. Where police reports hinted at possible misconduct, service records documented proven trustworthiness. Two versions of the same man existed, one constructed from assumptions, the other from verified facts. Yet civilian authorities dismissed the military evidence initially. Prosecutors argued his service record didn't disprove the specific allegations. They ignored the larger pattern, that a man with 16 years of documented excellence suddenly became, in their eyes, a suspect based on unsubstantiated claims. His chain of command reacted differently. When base leaders learned of the arrest, they immediately verified his whereabouts through security logs. Within hours, they'd confirmed the timeline discrepancies. The Marine Corps didn't wait for civilian courts to act. They initiated their own investigation and quickly cleared him of any wrongdoing. This divergence revealed a critical flaw. Civilian and military justice systems often operate in parallel without intersecting. A positive military record doesn't automatically transfer to civilian courts unless the defense forces the issue. Most defendants lack the resources to do so effectively. The sniper's case proved an exception because his specialization triggered additional protections. His security clearance required automatic JAG review of any legal proceedings. That safeguard, designed to protect national security, ended up protecting him from a miscarriage of justice. Most service members never get that level of scrutiny. Thousands of veterans face civilian charges each year without their military records being properly considered. The burden falls entirely on the defendant to prove their service history matters. By the time the general entered the picture, the factual disconnect had become too glaring to ignore. On one side stood a police report with inconsistent statements and missing documentation. On the other lay 17 years of unimpeachable military service. The two versions couldn't both be true. That fundamental contradiction is what compelled the general's unprecedented intervention. He recognized what the civilian system had missed, that the man in handcuffs didn't match the paperwork. That realization would ripple far beyond this single courtroom. Yet without those stars on his collar, would anyone have listened? The military's evidence had been available all along. It took a 4-star general walking into court to force the system to see it. A junior JAG officer scanning routine court dockets paused on an unfamiliar case. The system had flagged it automatically, standard procedure for any legal proceeding, involving active duty personnel. But something stood out immediately. The defendant's occupation field read unemployed, yet his birth date and name matched an active Marine sniper with top-level security clearance. She reached for the interagency verification protocols. The military maintains real-time access to civilian arrest records specifically to catch discrepancies like this. Within minutes, her screen populated with stark contradictions. The arrest report claimed narcotics involvement, yet the Marine's file showed 17 consecutive clean drug tests. The timeline placed him in police custody during hours when base logs confirmed he was still on the rifle range. She escalated it to her supervisor. By noon, the case reached the base commander's desk. Marines don't typically react visibly to paperwork, but witnesses later described the colonel slamming his hand on the file. "This isn't just wrong," he reportedly told staff. "It's impossible." The commander immediately requested full discovery from civilian courts, invoking the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, a four-star general was reviewing briefing materials for a racial equity task force. His staff had included the snipers case as an example of systemic breakdowns in military-civilian coordination. The general had seen hundreds of similar cases over his career, minor discrepancies, paperwork errors. But this one was different. Time-stamped evidence was irrefutable. The arresting officers claimed they'd detained him at 22:45 hours. Military gate logs showed him scanning out at 23:17. The distance between locations made their timeline physically impossible. Either the officers lied about the time, or they'd stopped the wrong Marine. The general's staff worked through the night verifying every detail. They pulled range logs showing the sniper qualifying with live rounds that afternoon. They checked security footage confirming his vehicle hadn't left base until 2313. They even mapped the route, calculating that driving straight home would have put him at the alleged stop location no earlier than 2342. The police report claimed officers smelled marijuana immediately. Yet military medical records showed the sniper had undergone a routine physical 3 days prior, including full toxicology screening. The results were pristine, no traces of any substances. His commanding officer submitted a sworn affidavit attesting to the sniper's meticulous avoidance of even over-the-counter medications that could impair his marksmanship. By dawn, the general had his answer. This wasn't just a paperwork error or a misunderstanding. The system had failed at every checkpoint. Officers didn't verify military status. Prosecutors didn't request discovery evidence. The judge had nearly accepted the charges without seeing contradictory records that were readily available. What happened next broke protocol. Normally, such cases work through formal channels. Military lawyers file motions. Commanders submit statements. The general chose a different path. He instructed his aide to clear his schedule. Then he did something unheard of for an officer of his rank. He personally reviewed the sniper's service record, compiling every commendation, every evaluation, every piece of evidence that contradicted the arrest report. The JAG team continued building the legal case while the general prepared his own intervention. He knew the power dynamics at play, how civilian courts often dismiss military testimony unless it carries unmistakable authority. So he decided to provide that authority in person. His staff reached out to the sniper's civilian attorney, offering full military cooperation. They shared unredacted medical records, training logs, and security footage. None of this information had been requested by the original prosecutors, a fact the general noted with growing concern. Meanwhile, base commanders took their own extraordinary step. They convened an emergency review board to assess the sniper's status. Normally, such reviews take weeks. They completed it in 6 hours, issuing a formal finding that the charges were irreconcilable with 17 years of documented service. The general received that finding just as he was finishing his briefing materials. It confirmed what the timestamp evidence already proved. The sniper couldn't have committed the alleged violations. The arrest wasn't just mistaken, it was impossible based on military records. He made 2 final requests before leaving for the courthouse. First, he asked for the sniper's pending promotion paperwork to be expedited. Second, he ordered his dress uniform prepared with full medal display. Every ribbon, every insignia would be visible. The general understood the optics. 4-star generals don't attend municipal court hearings without reason. His presence would send an unmistakable message that the military's evidence couldn't be ignored, that the sniper's record demanded respect. Back at the courthouse, the sniper's attorney was filing a motion to dismiss based on the newly discovered evidence. Prosecutors had begun backpedaling, offering deferred adjudication, a deal that would still leave the arrest on record. The attorney refused. They didn't know yet about the general's plans. Nobody did. Not the prosecutor, not the judge, not even the sniper. The system had operated in predictable patterns up to this point: paperwork exchanges, legal motions. The general canceled 3 meetings when the file hit his desk. One was with Joint Chiefs staff, another was a security briefing. The third, His weekly review of troop deployments could only be deferred by direct order. He gave that order without hesitation. His aide later remarked that in 15 years of service, he'd never seen the general's expression change so drastically. The man who'd stared down insurgent assaults and geopolitical crises now looked like he'd seen something impossible in an ordinary arrest report. This wasn't his first encounter with such cases. The general had spent 2 years spearheading a diversity initiative after similar incidents, minorities in uniform facing disproportionate scrutiny off base. But those had involved lower-ranking personnel, paperwork corrections, quiet reprimands. This was different. The time-stamped evidence showed the system hadn't just failed, it had fabricated realities. He summoned his senior JAG officer and the base commander. Together they walked through each inconsistency: the arrest location versus gate logs, the alleged time versus training records, the narcotics accusations versus 17 clean drug tests. Cross-referencing these documents required no specialized training, just basic arithmetic and willingness to look. That's what disturbed him most. Someone, at some point, could have checked. Should have checked. Base personnel were reachable 24/7 for verification requests. The Defense Manpower Data Center maintains an active duty verification hotline specifically for law enforcement. Neither resource had been utilized. The general made his decision while reviewing the sniper's service record. Page after page of exemplary conduct, marksmanship awards, valor citations, leadership commendations. The contrast with the civilian charges wasn't just stark, it was grotesque. He turned to his aide with quiet finality. "Prepare my dress blues." His staff understood the gravity instantly. Full dress uniform meant 4 stars displayed prominently. Ribbons from 3 wars. Jump wings. Expert marksman badges. Every visual cue of authority the military could bestow. He wasn't going as an observer. He was entering that courtroom as the physical embodiment of institutional credibility. Protocol manuals don't address this scenario. There's no guidance on when a 4-star general should personally intervene in a municipal proceeding. That's because it's not supposed to happen. The military justice system intentionally avoids appearances of influencing civilian courts. He broke that precedent deliberately. The general knew symbols carried weight in legal settings. A letter from command might be ignored. A lawyer's motion could be denied. But when the 3rd highest ranking officer in the Marine Corps walks into court wearing every medal he's earned, even the most case-weary judge takes notice. His staff moved with controlled urgency. They contacted the sniper's attorney without alerting prosecutors, an intentional choice to prevent last-minute maneuvering. They pulled security footage from the sniper's base that morning, documenting his composed demeanor hours after the alleged incident. They prepared a certified copy of his pending promotion packet, dated 3 weeks prior to the arrest. The general reviewed each document personally. When his aide asked if they should prepare talking points, he declined. "I'll speak to the facts," he said. "That's all that's required." Meanwhile, the court proceeded unaware. The sniper's attorney had filed a motion to dismiss based on the new evidence, but the docket showed it hadn't been ruled on. Prosecutors were offering a deferred adjudication, a deal requiring no plea, but leaving the arrest record intact. This compromise revealed the system's inertia. Even with contradictory evidence, the path of least resistance was to accept some version of the charges. The prosecutor later admitted they'd assumed the military records were exaggerations, until the general's staff provided certified copies. At 09:45, the general inspected his uniform. Every ribbon aligned, every medal polished. His aide handed him a folder containing certified copies of the sniper's personnel file, medical records, and security clearance documentation. The paperwork alone weighed 3 pounds. He arrived at the courthouse without fanfare. No motorcade, no security detail. Just one aide carrying a briefcase. They parked in visitor spaces like any other citizens. The general declined shortcuts through employee entrances. He walked through the main doors like any litigant would. Court officers didn't recognize him at first. Why would they? 4-star generals don't typically appear in traffic violation hearings. One clerk assumed he was testifying as a character witness until she saw the stars on his shoulders. Word spread through the building before he reached the courtroom. Inside, the sniper sat beside his attorney, unaware of what was coming. The judge had just called the case when the doors swung open. Movement in the gallery made the sniper turn. Later, he'd described the moment in 3 words. Disbelief, then pride. The general didn't stride in dramatically. He entered with measured steps, the way officers move during inspections. But in that setting, his mere presence was seismic. The prosecutor's head snapped around. The clerk stopped typing mid-sentence. Even the judge, a Vietnam veteran, straightened, in recognition of those insignias. Permission to approach, Your Honor, the general said. His voice carried without effort, the tone perfected by decades addressing troops in hangars and on decks. The prosecutor objected immediately. This is highly irregular, Your Honor. Military display shouldn't influence these proceedings. The judge, himself a former Army captain, leaned forward. I think we can all agree this is already irregular. Silence spread as the general reached the defense table. He didn't address the court first. He turned to the sniper and executed a precise hand salute, a gesture reserved for honoring equals. The sniper, still in civilian clothes, returned it perfectly. That moment changed everything. No 4-star general salutes a subordinate without cause. The gesture conveyed what stacks of paperwork couldn't: institutional trust that outweighed any civilian charge. When the judge asked his purpose, the general kept it simple: to correct the record. He placed the personnel file on the defense table and surveyed the room. This Marine service speaks for itself. I'm here to ensure it's heard. Prosecutors scrambled. They requested a recess, suddenly eager to review documents they'd previously dismissed. The judge denied immediate adjournment but allowed 10 minutes, barely enough time for frantic whispers between prosecutors and police representatives. Throughout this flurry, the general remained still. His bearing wasn't confrontational, but immovable, the posture of someone accustomed to waiting out storms. He'd come prepared to stay all day if necessary. When proceedings resumed, the district attorney arrived personally, an unusual step for a misdemeanor hearing. Something had changed during those 10 minutes. The prosecutor's confident assertions gave way to careful phrasing. Requests became suggestions. Objections melted into, with your honor's permission. The judge recognized the shift. Veterans understand what stars represent, not just rank but scrutiny. Those 4 insignias meant the general had answered to presidents and congressional committees. His presence guaranteed this case would no longer unfold in obscurity. When the generals speak, systems listen, not because of the medals but because of what earned them. Every ribbon on that uniform referenced documented facts: combat deployments, meritorious service, proven leadership. Now those same standards would apply to the courtroom. The prosecutor moved to dismiss all charges in the interest of justice. Oh, phrase that hadn't appeared in any earlier discussions. The judge granted it immediately. No conditions, no deferrals. A clean erasure. Afterwards, the general did something unexpected. He requested permission to address the sniper directly, not as a superior officer, but as one professional to another. The judge allowed it. What followed wasn't an official reprimand to the arresting officers, not a press conference, not even a promise of investigations. Just quiet words between 2 Marines while the court watched. This never should have happened. On behalf of your service, I apologize. Then came the revelation even the sniper didn't expect. The general turned to the judge and announced the sniper's pending promotion, effective immediately by special order. The timing was deliberate, not whispered in a hallway afterward, but declared publicly on record, making the sniper's vindication inseparable from his advancement. Courtroom protocol barely accommodated what happened next. The bailiff had to instruct gallery members to remain seated as spontaneous applause broke out, something strictly forbidden during proceedings. The judge allowed it for precisely 7 seconds before calling order. Later, the general would downplay his role. I just presented facts, he told senior staff, but those facts carried institutional weight precisely because of who delivered them. As he left the courthouse, reporters asked why this case? Why now? His answer lasted 7 words before he walked away. Because someone finally told the truth. The courtroom doors swung open with a force that turned every head. Fluorescent light caught the 4 silver stars on the general's shoulders first, then the rows of medals across his chest. The sudden silence held weight, not the quiet of boredom, but the stillness before revelation. The prosecutor was mid-sentence when the movement distracted him. His objection came quickly. "Your Honor, this is military intimidation, plain and simple." But his voice lacked conviction. He'd been a district attorney 20 years, yet never seen dress blues in his courtroom. Theo, Judge, a Vietnam veteran with faded army tattoos beneath his robe, leaned forward. His eyes traced the general's insignia with professional recognition. That changed things. Veterans understand what stars represent beyond rank. They're shorthand for institutional gravity. For 3 seconds, no one moved. The bailiff froze near the witness stand. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her stenograph machine. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Then the general took 6 precise steps forward, the measured cadence of someone accustomed to making space yield. The prosecutor tried again. "We can't have armed personnel influencing—" "Captain," the judge interrupted, using the prosecutor's former Navy rank deliberately, "that officer isn't armed." He gestured toward the general's empty holster, a calculated choice the military makes when entering civilian spaces. The absence spoke louder than presence. The sniper, still in street clothes at the defense table, didn't turn immediately. Later he described the sound, the distinctive click of dress shoes on tile that every service member recognizes. When he finally faced the entrance, his spine straightened reflexively. The general didn't acknowledge the gallery's murmurs. He walked directly to the defense table and placed a leather-bound folder beside the sniper's elbow. The motion was deliberate, not handing it to him but positioning it where the judge could see. 3 inches thick, stamped with the Marine Corps seal. The judge steepled his fingers. "General, state your purpose." The prosecutor started to rise, but his junior associate pulled him back down. "Smart move. Vietnam-era judges don't tolerate interruptions, especially from lawyers who've never served." When the general spoke, his voice carried without amplification, the kind of tone honed by addressing battalions in open fields. "Permission to address the court directly, Your Honor." That phrasing mattered. He wasn't demanding, he wasn't pleading. He was following protocol, showing deference to civilian authority while making his presence undeniable. The judge glanced at the defense attorney, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Granted," he said, "but keep it brief." 18 feet separated the general from the bench. He covered them in 5 strides, each footfall audible in the hush. From his inner pocket, he withdrew a single sheet of paper, official letterhead visible, even from the gallery. "Your Honor, this Marine service record speaks for itself." He placed the document on the bench. "What happened here isn't just a clerical error. It's systemic failure written in triplicate." The prosecutor made a sound halfway between a scoff and a cough. The judge shot him a look that translated roughly to, "Not now." What happened next rewrote courtroom dynamics. The general turned deliberately toward the sniper and rendered a hand salute. Crisp, textbook perfect, held for the regulation 3 seconds. In military terms, that gesture held layered meaning. A 4-star general doesn't salute juniors unless circumstances demand it. This was visual shorthand for, "This Marine's honor is beyond question." The sniper in civilian clothes returned it flawlessly, his fingers aligned precisely, elbow at the correct angle. The silent exchange lasted 6 seconds total but conveyed what stacks of paperwork couldn't. The prosecution table erupted. "Your Honor, this is theater," one attorney protested. The judge ignored him, studying the document before him. His eyebrows lifted slightly at one paragraph, likely the God's eye view summary from the sniper's commanding officer. 17 years without disciplinary action, 2 combat tours, pending promotion. The general didn't wait for a reaction. From his aide, he accepted a second folder, this one containing time-stamped evidence, security logs, range schedules, the gate access report placing the sniper miles away during his alleged arrest time. Each page bore digital verification codes showing they'd been pulled from secure servers just hours earlier. "Your Honor," the general said, "there's a difference between mishandled paperwork and manufactured reality." He let that land before continuing. This man didn't just serve. He excelled under conditions these officers couldn't fathom. Yet somehow, his word wasn't worth verifying. The judge tapped one finger against the bench, a thinking rhythm familiar to longtime court watchers. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to the general. He addressed the prosecutor directly. "Captain, did your office request these records?" The pause stretched too long. "Your Honor, standard discovery." "Answer the question, counsel." Another beat. "Not specifically, no." The judge exhaled through his nose. Suddenly everyone understood why the general had come personally. Bureaucratic inertia had nearly railroaded an exemplary Marine because no one bothered checking readily available facts. The general stepped back, ceding center stage. His point was made. Now it was the system's turn to respond. But before the judge could rule, the courtroom doors burst open again, this time admitting the district attorney himself, red-faced and carrying a hastily assembled file. The sight of his city's top prosecutor rushing to a misdemeanor hearing confirmed what everyone now suspected. Those 4 stars had changed everything. The DA didn't approach the bench. He went straight to the general and extended his hand, an olive branch and admission all at once. The general accepted the handshake, but his attention remained on the judge. Because ultimately this wasn't about apologies or professional courtesy. It was about correcting something fundamentally broken. When the general finally spoke again, his words filled the silent room. "Your Honor, all I ask is that the truth appears in your record as clearly as it does in ours." And with that, he took his seat beside the sniper, not as his superior but as his advocate. For the first time in the proceedings, the system hesitated. The gears ground against something they weren't built to process. Institutional accountability made flesh, wearing 4 stars and battle ribbons at a defendant's table. The judge adjusted his glasses and reached for his gavel. What came next would expose more than legal errors. It would reveal what justice looks like when someone finally holds up a mirror. The courtroom fell silent as the general stood. He didn't face the judge. Instead, he turned directly toward the sniper, still in street clothes at the defense table, and spoke 6 words no one expected. "On behalf of your service, I apologize." That phrasing carried strategic weight. Not on behalf of the court or the legal system, not even the Marine Corps. Just your service on honoring the one thing no false arrest could erase. The apology landed visibly. The sniper's jaw tightened briefly. A reaction every combat veteran recognizes. The physical manifestation of wounds that don't bleed. The general continued without courtroom formalities. "You returned from Fallujah without a single disciplinary flag." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket, a master personnel report tracking every assignment, commendation, and drug test across 17 years. Yet somehow local authorities couldn't verify basic facts about one of our most decorated snipers. Prosecutors shifted uncomfortably. They'd expected procedural arguments about chain of custody or technical errors. Not this, not a 4-star. General recounting deployment dates and training schedules with the precision of someone who'd personally reviewed the files. The general didn't raise his voice as he listed failures. The officers never contacted base personnel. The district attorney refused discovery requests for military records. The judge nearly ruled on charges without seeing documentation that placed the sniper miles away during the alleged incident. Each point struck methodically, stripping away plausible deniability. Then came the documentation. One by one, the general's aide handed certified copies to the bailiff. Gate logs showing the sniper still on base when police claimed to arrest him. Toxicology reports from his physical 3 days prior. Even the original Bronze Star nomination memo describing his unmatched calm under fire. The judge examined each document with growing unease. Here was proof that multiple systems had failed catastrophically. The military's meticulous records formed a mirror showing civilian authorities their own negligence. The general paused. Courtroom observers later described what happened next as the quietest power move in military legal history. He produced a single sheet bearing the Marine Corps seal and approached the sniper. "By special order of the commandant," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "your promotion is hereby effective as of this moment." That timing was deliberate, not whispered afterward in some hallway, not processed through bureaucratic channels next week. Right there in open court while the record was rolling. The general could have cited regulations or precedent. Instead, he weaponized symbolism, one Marine honoring another in the very arena that had doubted him. The prosecutor finally found his voice. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "So was his arrest, Counselor," the judge interrupted. His gaze dropping to the body cam transcripts he'd just received, the ones where officers admitted they never checked military databases because he didn't look like he'd served. The general wasn't finished. He turned again to the sniper. "You'll report to command within 24 hours for reassignment." A murmur spread through the gallery. Reassignment usually meant disciplinary action, but the general's tone left no doubt. This wasn't punitive. It was protective. Then the reveal. "Your new billet will be with JAG Corps, teaching them how to prevent exactly what happened here." The sniper's attorney allowed himself a small, tight smile. JAG assignments require pristine records. The general hadn't just cleared his name, he'd institutionalized his credibility. Prosecutors exchanged frantic notes. This case had just escalated beyond traffic violations. The general had essentially announced military investigation findings before civilian authorities concluded theirs. The judge rubbed his temples. "General, does this mean your office disputes every allegation in the arrest report?" "Not disputes, Your Honor." The general motioned to his aide. A projector screen descended, an unusual sight in misdemeanor court. "We refute them conclusively." Security. Footage played next. Grainy black and white footage from the sniper's base time-stamped 23:17 hours, 32 minutes after police claimed to have him detained. There he was, clear as day, scanning out through the main gate. The footage continued, showing him stopping at the base exchange, then driving out with other Marines. The general overlaid another document, the arresting officer's sworn affidavit claiming the stop occurred at Toste 5. "Either our gate logs are falsified," he said calmly, "or their report is." No one moved. The implications settled over the room like dust after an explosion. The general pressed on. "Team leaders don't let impaired Marines handle $15,000. Precision rifles." He projected range logs showing the sniper qualifying expert that very afternoon. His fingerprints were on live rounds 6 hours before this alleged stop. Military rules mandate 12 hours sober before weapons handling. The math hung in the air, inescapable and damning. Then the general delivered the final blow. An internal police email chain his staff had uncovered during discovery. Officers discussing how these military types think rank matters off base. Another quipped about attitude adjustments for veterans who flash their IDs too much. The judge's gavel hit the bench. "That's enough." He turned to the prosecutors. "You will move to dismiss today." But the general wasn't seeking dismissal anymore, he wanted vindication. "Your Honor, we request an official finding of factual innocence." The legal distinction mattered. Dismissal leaves a gray area. Factual innocence erases the arrest entirely, ensuring no lingering whispers about getting off on a technicality. The district attorney, now personally present, started to protest. The judge silenced him with a look. "Counselor, you have two choices. Either join the motion for factual innocence, or explain on appeal why you ignored 17 years of documented honor." For the first time, the general displayed emotion, not anger, but disappointment. "They arrested the wrong man," he said to the room at large. "But more importantly, they arrested a man who never existed, because that was the deeper truth the general exposed that day. The suspect described in police reports, unemployed, possibly intoxicated, uncooperative, bore no resemblance to the actual Marine. Yet somehow this fiction had navigated the entire legal system unchallenged. Until now. As the judge finalized the paperwork, the general did one last unexpected thing. He asked the sniper for his opinion. "Master Sergeant," he said deliberately, using the newly confirmed rank, "is this outcome acceptable to you?" The sniper stood. "Sir, I just want my security clearance reinstated so I can deploy again. Simple, direct, no posturing. Exactly how Marines are trained to speak." The general nodded. He turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, we have one final request." The room held its breath. "Expunge the arrest from all databases immediately. Not tomorrow, today." Because here's what everyone finally understood. The general wasn't just correcting one wrong. He was preventing the next. Without complete erasure, bureaucratic systems could resurrect the false record years later, haunting promotions, security clearances, even VA benefits. The judge signed the order without hesitation. He knew exactly what he was witnessing, not just justice served, but justice fortified against future erosion. As the general gathered his papers, the district attorney approached cautiously. "Sir, about those police emails, already forwarded to Internal Affairs," the general said without looking up. That's when the final lesson landed. Accountability comes in layers. Clearing the sniper's name was step 1. Ensuring no other service member faced similar treatment was step 2. The bailiff called the next case. Business as usual resumed. But something fundamental had changed in that room, not just for the sniper, but for every veteran who'd watched the footage later. Systems can be made to answer, truth can win, even if it takes 4 stars to light the way. Outside, reporters shouted questions as the general walked to his car. "Why intervene personally?" one asked. He paused with his hand on the door. 17 years of perfect service. 3 hours of baseless incarceration. One question holding all the weight. Because his record, the general said simply, deserved to walk into that courtroom too. Then he drove off, leaving something unexpected behind. A template. Proof that when justice falters, the powerful can choose to become amplifiers rather than obstacles. That apologies don't weaken authority, they concentrate it. Inside, the sniper exited through a different door. No handcuffs this time. Just a uniform waiting at base and a rifle cleared for use again. The cracks remained, in the system, in the policies, in the assumptions that let this happen. But for now, one Marine's record stood whole. More importantly, unignorable, because that's what the general had really accomplished that day. He hadn't just corrected a record. He'd made the invisible visible, and in doing so, given weight back to truth. The sniper's reassignment to JAG would prove pivotal. Within months, he'd helped design new military-civilian liaison protocols, ensuring service members' records automatically enter evidence during arrests. But that day, walking out, he allowed himself one small indulgence. He stopped by the courthouse locker where his personal effects had been stored during processing. His wallet, his keys, and a single folded paper, the Bronze Star nomination he'd carried for luck. Now it could be filed properly, along with everything else. The district attorney's office had ignored 18 previous motions in this case. Then the general walked in. Suddenly, the city's top prosecutor personally appeared in a courtroom usually handled by junior assistants. He carried no files, asked for no recess, just stood and uttered 5 words that changed everything. "We move to dismiss all charges." The phrase, "in the interest of justice," should have meant something. Here, it rang hollow. These were the same prosecutors who'd fought discovery requests for months, who'd insisted the sniper accept deferred adjudication rather than clear his name. Now, acting like this was their idea all along. The judge didn't bother hiding his skepticism. "On what grounds, Counselor?" "The evidence suggests irregularities." The DA's careful phrasing avoided admitting wrongdoing while acknowledging what everyone now knew. He kept glancing at the general, who stood silently observing, his dress uniform doing the talking for him. "What evidence, specifically?" The time stamped. gate logs placing the sniper on base during the alleged stop. The officers' sworn statements contradicting their own body cam footage. Most damning, the military's documentation proving his security clearance would have been revoked for any drug use. The police chief held a press conference that afternoon 3 blocks away. No misconduct occurred, he told reporters. Officers acted in good faith based on available information, except the record showed otherwise. When the sniper's attorneys finally obtained unredacted police reports months later, they found handwritten notes from the arrest. One officer had scribbled "Marine" beside the suspect's description, then circled it twice. They'd known. They just hadn't cared enough to verify. Then came the body cam footage the public never saw. Recordings from after the arrest showed officers back at the station joking about the encounter. "Another wannabe hero flashing his military ID," one said. Another laughed. "They always think that matters here. No drugs were found, no prior arrests. Just a taillight that wasn't broken, and a Marine who didn't show what they considered proper deference." That's what this case was always about. Not public safety, but bruised egos and unchecked biases. The city's settlement offer arrived 6 weeks later, $1.2 million plus expungement. Not an admission of guilt, just cold financial calculus. Fighting would have cost more in legal fees alone, but money couldn't repair what had been broken. For 17 years, the sniper's record held 0 blemishes. Then 3 hours in cuffs spawned bureaucratic nightmares. His security clearance froze automatically pending review. Base access permissions were temporarily revoked. The arrest appeared in background checks until the expungement processed, which took 8 months despite court orders. His civil suit revealed something disturbing. The arresting officers had 4 prior complaints between them for similar stops, all involving minority drivers, all based on equipment violations. None resulted in discipline. The department's Internal Affairs Division rubber-stamped everyone. Meanwhile, the general's intervention had ripple effects. The Pentagon issued new guidelines requiring immediate JAG notification whenever a service member was detained. 38 states updated their protocols for verifying military status during arrests. But the officers, they kept their jobs, received additional training. One was promoted to sergeant 6 months later. The system protected its own while offering the sniper the only language it understood, a check with 6 zeros. He took the money, but not quietly. Half went to veterans' legal defense funds. Another quarter created scholarships for minority applicants to the Naval Academy. The rest he kept, not as compensation but as evidence. Documentation of what his honor was worth to them. Media coverage focused on the general's dramatic appearance, the apology, the promotion. Easy symbols of justice served. Few reporters dug deeper into why it required 4 stars to achieve what the facts should have guaranteed from day one. The sniper's new JAG assignment gave him unexpected leverage. He helped draft directives ensuring military records are automatically incorporated into civilian discovery. Designed training programs teaching JAG officers how to track arrests of service members in real time. Some called this special treatment. He called it damage control. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: without the general's intervention, his case would have followed the usual trajectory. A plea deal to make it go away. A blemish on an otherwise spotless record. Another veteran, statistically disappeared into the system. The police chief eventually retired with full pension. The DA won re-election unopposed. Life moved on. But in military justice circles, something shifted. The case became required study at JAG schools, a cautionary tale about institutional blindness, a playbook for pushing back when systems fail. The dear sniper never got those lost hours back. Never recovered the deployment opportunities derailed while his clearances were frozen. But he gained something more valuable, proof that truth could win if someone powerful enough insisted. At his Bronze Star ceremony months later, the general remarked to a junior officer, "They apologized because we made them look, not at him, at themselves." That was the real victory, not the dismissal, not the settlement, forcing the system to confront its own reflection and blink first. Now when he trains JAG officers, the sniper emphasizes one lesson above all: paper beats promises. Every time, document everything. Assume nothing will be verified unless you force the issue. Because he knows better than most. Heroism isn't just about facing enemy fire. Sometimes it's standing calmly in a courtroom while the system you served tries to break you, and surviving intact enough to make sure no one else has to. The sniper returned to his unit, but something fundamental had changed. He submitted transfer papers within 30 days, not out of anger but purpose. The JAG Corps wasn't where snipers typically went. That was the point. His new office sat inside a military legal training center where he taught civil rights protocols to fresh JAG officers. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same system that failed him now relied on him to fix its blind spots. His lectures always started the same way, with copies of his own arrest report, the one that listed him as unemployed. "This is what institutional bias looks like," he'd say, sliding the paperwork down the table. "Now let's discuss how to prevent it." The classroom atmosphere shifted whenever he entered. Young lieutenants sat straighter. Notes pages turned more deliberately. Here was living proof that documentation gaps could derail careers and lives. He taught them to request gate logs, training schedules, urinalysis records. Simple things that could have ended his case in minutes rather than months. Not everyone welcomed his presence. Older JAG instructors muttered about special treatment. Some resented how quickly he'd transitioned from defendant to instructor. The whispers followed him through base exchanges and officer clubs, that his appointment was political, that the general had intervened too aggressively. He ignored them. The work mattered more than their egos. 6 months after the hearing, his Bronze Star came through with no fanfare. The citation listed actions in Fallujah he never discussed, dragging 2 wounded Marines through enemy fire while calling in coordinates. When his commander presented the medal, the room contained only necessary personnel. No cameras, no speeches, just a handshake and the quiet words, "Should have happened years ago." The general's mentorship changed everything. Their monthly meetings had crisp agendas: career planning, professional development, legislative reforms. The old man never referenced the courtroom directly, though its shadow lingered. Instead, he provided something rarer: honest guidance about navigating systems designed to resist change. "You'll hit institutional resistance at Major," the general told him during one session. "Not a warning, a factual statement. They'll claim you're better suited to operational roles." Translation: some promotions boards still viewed civil rights work as peripheral rather than essential. Their solution was tactical. The general steered him into assignments that built unassailable credentials: teaching at the Naval War College, consulting on DoD policy revisions. Each billet made his expertise undeniable. Meanwhile, the sniper completed his degree through military education programs, checking boxes for future advancement. His transition shocked former teammates. The same hands that once stabilized sniper rifles now drafted legal memoranda with equal precision. Colleagues noted his courtroom presence, the ability to stand perfectly still during cross-examinations, a skill sharpened in hides overlooking hostile territories. Base legal clinics saw immediate impacts from his reforms. Where service members once struggled to access their own records during civilian disputes, new protocols mandated automatic documentation sharing. Junior enlisted now carried wallet cards with instructions for invoking military legal protections. During police encounters, his idea implemented base-wide within 12 months. The whispers never fully stopped. At a Norfolk reception, 2 senior JAGs speculated about his rocket promotion. They didn't notice him refilling coffee nearby. He let them talk. Their confusion said everything. They couldn't reconcile his record with their assumptions. Good. Let them wrestle with that dissonance. His most meaningful work happened after hours. Pro bono cases for veterans whose benefits got entangled in bureaucratic red tape. Late-night calls to bases when MPs detained service members under questionable circumstances. Each intervention followed the same pattern: cold facts, verifiable, records, relentless documentation. The methodical approach of someone who'd learned how systems fail firsthand. Officer Candidate School changed the calculus. The general's recommendation letter carried weight, but the selection board cared more about his recent accomplishments. The policy papers, the training programs, the flawless efficiency reports. When his acceptance notice arrived, he framed it alongside his Bronze Star citation. One proved his past, the other secured his future. Classmates initially treated him with caution. His reputation preceded him, both the courtroom incident and his subsequent reforms. Some assumed he'd received preferential treatment. They changed their minds after the first land navigation exercise, when he spotted terrain discrepancies the instructors had missed. Old skills translated unexpectedly. The general attended his OCS commissioning ceremony in civilian clothes, a deliberate choice. No stars to overshadow the moment. Just two Marines shaking hands under an oak tree, afterward discussing next assignments. No grand speeches. No references to how far they'd come. The ordinary nature of it felt like victory. His legal work expanded exponentially with officer status. Now he could sign motions, argue before military appellate courts, influence policy at higher levels. The reform packages he drafted started reaching congressional committees. Clean, precise language born from lived experience. Legislative aides recognized his name from the infamous courtroom footage. It opened doors, though he preferred letting the work speak for itself. Occasionally, young Jags asked about the arrest. He'd hand them a redacted case file, names removed, dates altered, and ask what they'd do differently. Most identified the systemic failures within minutes. Good. That meant the lesson stuck. The general's final gift arrived in a plain envelope, assignment orders to the Pentagon's Legal Policy Division. Not glamorous work, but influential. The kind of posting that shapes military justice for decades. His cubicle would sit 3 floors below the office where his own case had once landed on that fateful morning, full circle with a purpose. At his going-away gathering, a captain from Internal Review approached. "We reopened 73 cases after your reforms," she admitted. "Found 12 more like yours." He didn't ask for details. The number alone confirmed what they both knew. His story was never just his. Security cleared his new Pentagon badge faster than standard processing. The ID photo showed crisp officer insignia where handcuffs once rested. The system hadn't changed entirely, but it had flexed enough to make space for him. Now his mornings start with coffee brewed in a JAG Core mug, a gag gift from former students. His desk displays 2 framed documents, the Bronze Star citation and the dismissal order from that small courthouse. Not as trophies, as reminders. The general still checks in monthly. Their conversations shifted subtly over time. Less mentor-protege, more colleagues assessing shared missions. Sometimes they discuss policy hurdles. Other times, nothing consequential at all. The ordinary rhythm of professional respect. His old rifle remains locked in base armory under someone else's custody. He hasn't fired it in years. Some skills atrophy by design. Others transform. The precision required to hit targets at 800 yards now sharpens legal arguments about accountability at any distance. Classified briefings sometimes reference his courtroom case as a cautionary tale. How interagency failures endanger national security by compromising elite personnel. He listens without comment. The operational impacts were always part of the calculus. Current trainees hear a streamlined version. A case study in documentation gaps and verification protocols. His name never appears. Better that way. The lesson matters more than the protagonist. Sometimes, driving past that county courthouse, he considers stopping. Not to confront, just to stand in the lobby and absorb how different it feels unshackled. He never does. The work waiting at the Pentagon is more important than symbolic gestures. They awarded him a second commendation last month. Not for valor this time, but civil service. The citation mentions exceptional dedication to justice systems improvement. He keeps it in a drawer. There will be time to display it later. For now, policy manuals need revising. Training curricula require updates. New officers deserve better guidance than he received. The work continues precisely because the system remains imperfect. His newest initiative requires military status verification within 1 hour of any service member's arrest. Critics call it burdensome. He cites gate logs and timestamps. The math still wins. The general's last email contained a draft bill proposal, federal penalties for falsifying military status in law enforcement reports. He's reviewing line items between meetings. Some battles require legislative solutions. Others just need someone who remembers how the cracks feel from underneath. Morning light catches his monitor as he adjusts the wording. Somewhere, a junior JAG officer spots a discrepancy in a court docket. The systems turn slowly, but they turn. And for now, that's enough. The Pentagon's new monitoring protocols went live within 6 months of the courtroom incident. Every branch now requires immediate JAG review when any active duty member faces civilian arrest. Base. Commanders receive automated alerts within 15 minutes of booking, an upgrade from the old system where notifications sometimes took weeks. Police departments reacted in sharply different ways. Several major cities embraced the changes immediately, integrating military verification into existing systems. Officers could now verify service status through a shared Pentagon database with 3 clicks. But some unions pushed back hard. One state lodge president called it military overreach. Another claimed the procedures would slow arrests by valuable seconds. The Marine Corps didn't compromise. They implemented dual verification. If civilian authorities failed to check military status, base legal teams still received automatic notifications. The system now cross-references arrest records against deployment schedules and security logs. Discrepancies trigger immediate commander review. 38 state legislatures acted within 2 years. Their bills shared core requirements. Officers must check military status during stops. Prosecutors must verify service records before filing charges, and courts must consider military evidence during sentencing. The laws vary in strength. Some mandate training, others just suggest guidelines. But together they cover 3/4 of active duty personnel nationwide. The military justice system evolved too. JAG teams now conduct mirror reviews of all civilian cases involving service members. They compare police reports against military records line by line, searching for inconsistencies. Several high-profile discrepancies have already led to dismissed charges before trial. Police training curricula added new modules about military identification. Officers learn to spot valid credentials, understand deployment schedules, and recognize signs of PTSD that might explain behavior. The training isn't universally mandated but reaches thousands through federal grant programs. Critics still argue the changes don't go far enough. A Government Accountability Office report found only 12% of rural departments fully comply with verification laws. Some jurisdictions still process veterans as civilians by default, especially reservists and National Guard members. The Pentagon countered by expanding its outreach program. Legal teams now embed with local prosecutor offices in military-heavy regions. They provide instant verification instead of waiting for formal requests. Early adopters report a 90% drop in wrongful veteran arrests. The case also changed interagency communication. Federal databases now share real-time updates about service status changes. An arrest in Chicago now alerts both local prosecutors and the member's commanding officer simultaneously. Previous systems relied on manual checks that often missed critical details. Body cam policies evolved too. 7 states now require officers to announce military status confirmations on camera during stops. The recordings provide evidence that verification occurred. Early data shows these recordings reduced disputed arrests by nearly half. Promotion protocols adjusted as well. Pending advancements now receive priority review when service members face legal challenges. The military recognized how delayed promotions could prejudice civilian courts against defendants. Use of force reporting included new military considerations. Training emphasizes that veterans may react differently due to combat reflexes. Over 30 departments adopted veteran-ready programs, teaching de-escalation tactics tailored for service members. Community outreach expanded significantly. Military lawyers now conduct town halls near major bases, educating local police about service culture. Some events include scenario training, where officers interact with veterans in simulated stops. Technology played a key role. A Pentagon-developed app now provides instant military status verification without requiring sensitive data sharing. Officers see only confirmation of active service, not full records. Early adopters report faster, safer interactions. Civil rights groups track the changes closely. They've documented a 40% drop in disputed veteran arrests since the reforms began. But advocates note persistent disparities. Black veterans still face higher arrest rates than white counterparts even after verification. The military justice system itself adopted new safeguards. Commanders now receive legal training about civilian arrest procedures. Many didn't realize how minor charges could derail security clearances before the reforms. Media coverage shifted too. National outlets now routinely compare civilian charges against military records when reporting on veteran arrests. Several wrongful arrests have been exposed through this simple cross-checking. Law schools added veteran-specific coursework. Future. Prosecutors learn how to request military records, interpret service histories, and identify signs of biased policing against service members. Some programs include guest lectures from JAG officers. Veterans hospitals adjusted intake procedures. Now, when patients report legal trouble, staff check for possible military status verification failures. Several wrongful arrests have been prevented by medical professionals spotting discrepancies. Body armor became an unlikely flashpoint. Some officers mistakenly interpreted military-grade gear in personal vehicles as criminal indicators. New training clarifies that many veterans legally own such equipment from private purchases or military issue. The reforms face ongoing challenges. Budget constraints limit training expansion in some regions. Technology gaps prevent full database integration in rural areas. But the trajectory is clear. The case exposed systemic blind spots that institutions are now scrambling to address. The changes extend beyond paperwork. Cultural awareness training now includes military service alongside racial and gender sensitivity modules. Officers learn how battlefield experiences might affect civilian interactions. Statistical tracking improved dramatically. The FBI now flags arrests involving military members in its national crime data. Early analysis shows veterans are statistically less likely to commit crimes than civilians with similar demographics. The ripple effects even reached Hollywood. Several police procedural shows now include military verification scenes. While fictionalized, these portrayals help normalize the practice for millions of viewers. International forces took notice. NATO allies adopted similar verification protocols for their troops. Britain and Canada now require military status checks during civilian arrests after studying the U.S. reforms. Legal scholarship on the subject exploded. Law journals published over 70 articles analyzing the case's implications in just 3 years. Many focus on how institutional blind spots persist even for privileged subgroups like service members. Perhaps most importantly, the reforms created a blueprint. The same verification framework now adapts for other specialized groups. First responders, diplomats, even journalists in some states. Each expansion tests the system's flexibility, yet significant gaps remain. No federal law yet mandates universal military verification. The piecemeal state-by-state approach leaves service members vulnerable in non-compliant jurisdictions. Advocacy groups push for congressional action. The financial costs of wrongful arrests became clearer too. One study calculated that proper verification could save millions annually and reduced legal fees and settlements. Several cities reported lower misconduct payouts after implementing the protocols. Psychological impacts are now part of the conversation. Military psychologists note how wrongful arrests undermine transitioning veterans' trust in civilian institutions. Some treatment programs specifically address this trauma. The case's legacy grows as the systems continue evolving. What began as one sniper's ordeal became a nationwide reckoning with institutional accountability. Each new protocol, each training session, each database integration carries forward that same question. When the facts exist but nobody checks them, is that oversight or injustice? The reforms suggest an answer. Systems only work when someone ensures they see the full picture. Not just the suspect they assume stands before them, but the person who actually does. That lesson extends far beyond military cases. It's about what happens when institutions finally confront their own blind spots, and who pays the price until they do. The next test comes as the technology evolves. Facial recognition systems now incorporate military status alerts. Grondo. Surveillance footage can automatically flag veteran encounters. These tools promise faster verification but raise new civil liberty concerns. Congress debates whether to nationalize the reforms. Several bills propose tying federal law enforcement funding to military verification compliance. Police unions oppose blanket mandates but support incentive-based approaches. Meanwhile, the original courtroom where this began still hears cases daily. The judge has since retired but reportedly keeps a copy of the general's apology in his chambers. It serves as a reminder. Systems prefer inertia until someone with authority demands they look closer. That demand now echoes through policies, nationwide. Not perfectly, not uniformly, but indelibly. Because once the record gets corrected, there's no pretending it was ever right to begin with. The fight continues where databases don't sync, where training lags, where assumptions still override verification. But the trajectory is clear. Each reform makes it harder for systems to claim they didn't know who they were dealing with. Some battles get fought in courtrooms, others in legislatures or training academies. This one rages simultaneously across all fronts. That Marine sniper's case proved something unsettling. Even heroes wear targets when systems fail. The general's presence didn't fix things, it forced them into the light. His apology wasn't really about one officer's mistake. It exposed how the whole structure grinds forward without checking what it crushes. Reforms followed because accountability wore 4 stars that day. But real justice would have required no general in court, just officers doing basic verification from the start. The system designs who it sees and who it ignores. Until those in power admit that failure, every apology just papers over the cracks. Change comes when institutions finally question their own defaults, not with grand gestures but by correcting the record before the damage spreads. That Marine carried the weight of service and suspicion simultaneously, proof that credibility shouldn't depend on rank to be believed. The work continues where databases don't sync and assumptions still override facts. Progress happens when someone risks authority to say what shouldn't need saying, see people as they are, not as the system assumes. That's what made that general walk into court, not to lecture but to correct the record. Because silent systems only change when someone speaks their flaws aloud.